Hello, hello. So it is time for another tag video, which is why I'm at my desk instead of, my normal spot in front of my TV. So you can see my bookshelves in the background. It's all very nice. And today we're going to talk about the snob-o-meter tag. Um, and so this is basically to kind of figure out like if you are a book snob or not. And you might be able to tell by what I have on my shelves behind me, but I don't think I am. I think that that's something that I maybe can, even though I did get an English degree, I think that might be something that I can get away from, is those accusations. But so the first, there are 12 questions. The last one is tagging people. I don't ever tag people because these videos take so long for me to get like moved to my computer and then edited and uploaded that like it's not worth it. But I did see this video on Books I'm Not Reading's channel. I believe the original creator was That Reading Guy 28. So the first question is, what is your definition of book snobbery? And for me, book snobbery is less about what you read and more about how you approach it. So if you genuinely do really enjoy like reading classics and literary fiction and stuff like that, and that's just what you like, I don't think that makes you a book snob. I think it makes you a book snob when you look down on the people who don't like classics and literary fiction, or even if they do like classics and literary fiction, if you look down on books that are not in your preferred genre. And this actually doesn't, I don't think it is unique to classics and lit fic, because I do think we see a lot of that in like the fantasy and the horror communities too, where if for horror at least, because I'm a little bit more familiar with in that realm, like if something's not like extreme enough, sometimes we can get a little bit of snobbery there. Number two, is there a genre or type of book you would never consider reading? I don't think so. I will go through phases where like I don't think I'm a big fan of a certain genre, but I am trying. Like I try everything. My latest situation where I realized I might like a genre more than I originally thought was when I read was sci-fi, actually, because I recently, like last year, within the past year, read a book by Robert Heinlein, and it was real fucking good. And previously, like my thoughts on sci-fi were like, you know, eh. But no, I don't think there's a genre I would never read. I generally try to do everything. Three, does erotica count as literature? Yeah. Four, is it better to read classic books than popular bestsellers? Better? I don't know. I do think that there are some popular bestsellers that, if you really think about them, or if you actually read them, they're like not good. I'm thinking about like the Colleen Hoovers of the world, or that erotica situation. To say that classics are better might be a statement that you could make. However, I think it really depends on why you are reading. I think it's better to be reading Colleen Hoover than nothing. And I guess this might be my English major speaking a bit here, but I do think that the classics are classics for a reason. To absolutely discount them because you think they're boring, or because you have a fourth grade reading level, there's the snobbery coming out, because you can't understand them. I would maybe take a look at yourself and your reading habits. If you truly cannot understand classics as an adult, you need to take a look at your reading habits and maybe build on some of your skills a little bit. That doesn't maybe mean jumping directly from Colleen Hoover to, I don't know, George Orwell, although George Orwell is really a very manageable classic. He's very, very approachable. But maybe building it up a little bit, doing some modern classics, then going into some of the easier ones, like maybe like Hemingway, Steinbeck. The Americans in general are very approachable, and until you get to the beats, and like Burroughs is weird, but I don't know. I guess yeah, I think it's better, but I do think that reading anything is good. Five, have you ever bragged about reading a classic in order to sound smart? Absolutely. But since I was an English major, I had to one up it a little bit. And so my catchphrase was, and it still is actually true, that I've only ever read Camus in French. Absolutely. Six, do audiobooks count as reading? Wrote comics and graphic novels. I think yes. I personally don't really like audiobooks. When I'm wandering around or I'm doing something where I have headphones in, I like to listen to music, and I'm a better reader than a listener. I tend to zone out when I'm listening to things. And I'm also a faster reader than listener, because if you, my brain can process the written word faster than it can process audio. So like, yeah, you can turn up the speed on your audiobook, but if I were to turn up the speed on the audiobook to where I am at when I'm reading physically, it would be absolutely unintelligible. So I think they count. They are different skills. I think that when it comes to consuming stories, if the question is, can I put this on my Goodies? Absolutely. I think they're slightly different in terms of the consuming stories. I think that absolutely, if you're immersion reading, so if you're listening and reading at the same time, I think that's pretty good, especially if you are somebody who is trying to build their reading skills. That's what we do a lot with my fifth graders. Sorry. Where when we have our class novels, like we have book clubs where they read by themselves. When we have our full class novels, like everybody has a copy that they can follow along with, and I read it out loud. Comic books and graphic novels, I also think absolutely count as reading. Again, they're different skills. And I don't think that reading a copy, the first volume of Full Metal Alchemist, is going to do the same for you as reading Germinal by Emile Zola, but it does count. And yes, obviously, you put all of it on your Goodreads challenge. 7, have you ever looked down at someone for reading a popular fluff book? Not necessarily, unless I was already looking down on them for something else. Like, if I was already looking down on them for something else and I saw that they were reading Fourth Wing, I'd be like, this idiot only reads Fourth Wing, That's terrible. 8, have you ever been the recipient of someone else's snobbery? Yeah, sort of. I would say so. Like I said, I was an English major, and I'm an English major who primarily reads horror. So it wasn't like, I wouldn't say it was malicious, but it was a bit snobbery. There was some of that in college. 9, would you ever be friends with a snob? Yes, because I think they're kind of fun, and I kind of like to be the personality hired in a friend group. I'm a little bit more down to earth than some of that, so I would say yes. 10, are people who don't read less sophisticated than people who do? So here's the thing, yeah, I think so. When somebody tells me they don't read, in my head, the first thing that pops up is, okay, so you're an idiot, which is like not nice. I realize that's not nice, and I realize that there are all sorts of things. There's factors, there's time, stuff like that. But here's also the thing. So my parents, I grew up in rural North Dakota, and my dad's family, were like, it was a huge family, a bunch of farmers. You know what? All of them did so much. They were reading like maniacs. And granted, this was like, my dad was born in the early 70s, so this like 50s, 60s, 70s, there wasn't like as much to do other than that, especially in like rural North Dakota, so there's a lot of reading going on. But I just think about like the first person that finished my first book, Iscariot, was my Uncle John, and he was basically this poor hermit man who lived kind of in the middle of nowhere. He didn't really have any money or anybody, but he was a fucking reader. So I think that the barrier for entry for reading is so low. Like, people talk about how expensive reading is. It's not. Like, especially if you don't buy brand new books, or like if you don't buy from Barnes and Noble, you don't buy from Amazon, you don't buy the special editions, you go to any library book sale room and they are being sold for 10 cents. I guarantee it. And since you're already at the library, get a library card. So especially for Americans. I realize with all sorts of stuff with book bans, stuff like that, this might get a little bit trickier in the coming years. But thrift stores, eBay, lots of books on eBay. You can get so many books off of eBay, borrowing from friends, thrift stores, little free library. Like, their books are everywhere, and they're so cheap if you know how to look for them and if you're not being picky. So yes, I do look down on people who don't read. My first thought is always, oh, I'm sorry. I do. It is what it is. All right. So measure yourself based on your answer to the previous 10 questions. Would you qualify as a book snob? I guess kind of. I guess in my heart of hearts, I kind of am. But I think I might be. I think I'm a snob with a heart. Like I do. Like I said, I genuinely, my main genre is horror. It is. That's what I read. That's what I write. That's what I watch. I got a painting of Leatherface over there. I got a painting of Pennywise over there, right there. Yeah, you see him. Like that's my main thing, and I read a lot of manga. I read a lot of graphic novels, but I did get an English degree, and I think that affects me. English, you know what my minors were? French history and creative writing. That's the snobbiest degree you'll ever hear about. So yeah, I guess. But genuinely, I think if you are trying, if you are reading, if you are letting yourself grow and read widely, you're doing great and you're doing better than like 90% of Americans or other people. But I'm in America, so that's kind of my knowledge base, you know. So